I wanted to say a few things about Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. Now, he passed away today at the age of 82. And I'm sure some people out there are being like, well, that doesn't sound very inverted world at all. And I get it. But in my opinion, the Beach Boys are the nexus of almost everything we talk about on the show. And I was saying this to Brandon earlier. He was like, even Bigfoot? Okay, maybe not Bigfoot. Maybe not. That's a good point. That's a good point. Although Brian Wilson, at a certain point in his life, did kind of look like Bigfoot when he went through a crazy phase in his life. But I think a lot of people confuse the Beach Boys for like that happy-go-lucky surfer sound, the pop music of the 60s. But actually, the way I see it is that they are the soundtrack for American paranoia. They are the soundtrack for the death of the hippie love, Charles Manson, MK Ultra, but also American love and beauty. They meant a lot to me, but they encompass so much about the strange mysteries of the human condition and the awesomeness of God. I really think the Beach Boys were a perfect metaphor for America. And listening to them and knowing their mythology and thinking about Brian Wilson passing away today, it just made me think how a lot of their music, while it might sound very pretty on the surface, it reminds me of the opening scene from David Lynch's movie Blue Velvet. And David Lynch, we also lost this year. And I found out he passed away right before going live on this show. I think that was back in January. And I really do think Wilson and Lynch are similar in that regard. So the opening scene of Blue Velvet, it's like the perfect white picket fence, small town, people waving, flowers, lovebirds, fire trucks, just that typical Americana. But once you zoom in, as the camera does in the opening scene of that movie, all the way into the yard and through the dirt, you find the worms and the ugly underbelly of society, which then opens up to a movie about crimes, violence, paranoia, just hiding below the surface, which the way I listen to Beach Boys, that's how it is. Because I'm sure a lot of you know, the Beach Boys had a very strange connection to Charles Manson. Dennis Wilson, Brian's brother, allegedly wanted to join the Manson family. And they even rewrote one of Manson's songs. I believe Charles Manson's song was Cease to Exist. And Dennis took it. He said they traded food and a motorcycle or something for the song. And they turned it into Learn to Never Love Again, I think is the name of that song.
Real quick, Shane.
Yeah.
We just want to welcome over our Timcast members joining us over on YouTube. What's up, guys?
What is up, guys? Thank you so much for joining us. Shout out to IRL and everybody over there for the raid and all that good stuff. But yeah, that song is just beautiful how they did that. But it is a very strange connection, and there are strange stories floating out about the Beach Boys hanging out in that circle. But it's even connected to the broader context of the CIA running these ops in the counterculture movement. They were loosely connected to Laurel Canyon. A lot of the people who wrote with the Beach Boys, one of the lyricists who wrote with Brian Wilson, deeply connected with Laurel Canyon. And a book that some of you might be interested in, if you haven't read already, is Weird Scenes from Inside the Canyon, which is a great book to read if you like the book like Chaos by Tom O'Neill. And if you don't know about that book, you should definitely read it. And that's about Charles Manson, his connections to the CIA, MK Ultra. And we actually had the author of Chaos, Tom O'Neill, on the show last year, almost exactly a year ago, I think this week. But a lot of really bizarre connections, with the CIA operating within Laurel Canyon and that counterculture movement. Like the Mamas and the Papas have these weird connections to the government. Zappa had connections to the government. A lot of them had family members who were high up in the military doing strange things. I think Zappa's dad was like a biowarfare engineer. And Jim Morrison's father was the guy in charge of the Gulf of Tonkin. So a lot of weird connections. And just thinking about America at that time when the Beach Boys were really popping off, they were just creating a lot of that music that it sounded beautiful. And but it was like trying to be happy music in a very violent and absurd world. So I just want to say that about Brian and his music. It meant a lot to me on a personal level, just because my wife walked down the aisle to God Only Knows, which is my favorite song of all time, and each of my 3 children were born to that song as well. I just think it's the perfect song to enter Earth with. So 4 of the most important parts of my life happened with that song playing. And I highly recommend everyone getting into it if you're not familiar with them, because they're heavy. They might sound pretty on the surface, but they are heavy. I recommend looking into the songs like Till I Die. It's a great song. And Pet Sounds, which is great. But and then that's another example of just another thing we talk about on this show. Weird mental gifts and or curses, however you want to look at it. But Brian was someone who believed he had synesthesia, which is the ability to associate colors with sounds. And there's a lot of artists who believe they have that. And he would believe that helped him shape and write these just insane melodies. He said, I believe that music is God's voice. So I highly recommend everyone checking that out. If you haven't, look at them through this context of all the crazy things and the paranoia happening in the 60s to now. And you'll go down a fun rabbit hole. Have you given them a listen?
I have not, but I'm also still on the, like, you timed the birth of 3 children to a song.
Yeah. I had it ready to go. We had playlists for each of them, but I knew once they were actually entering Earth, that song had to be on.
Leave it to a musician, folks, to pull something that incredible out for the birth of not 1 but 3 children.
It had to happen. It's a great song to have in the room while they're born. And we listened to. I showed like my middle child today after hearing about it, and she's 4. I was like, this is so important to me. She's like, cool, thanks. I'm like, you'll know later on.
That's kids for you.
Yeah, they'll know later. And what I also, Surf's Up, great song. And if you want to know what I mean about just the insanity that was baked into the DNA of Brian Wilson, look up his version of Surf's Up, the 1967 solo piano version. Insane. It's insane. And another thing we talked about on the show a lot, like telepathy, telekinesis, mind control stuff. Brian went a little overboard while writing the album Smile, and the Smile was supposed to track like the history of America. And so he got to his song Mrs. O'Leary's Cow, talking about the Chicago fire. You probably know a little bit about that.
Only a little bit. I remember the White City and all of that stuff that they had built. I also remember that most of it, I think, was built out of like paper mache, which is why it was so easily flammable.
Yeah, not a good thing.
No, you think they would have saw that coming.
It's almost like they wanted it to happen. But he was writing this song about the fire, and he started making a fire in the studio while wearing like a fireman's helmet, and a fire happened down the street, and he believed that they were the cause of the fire, that they mentally, like through their mind, they manifested this fire down the street. And then he went into a phase of deep psychosis with drugs, which is a real bummer. When he had a really bad handler, in my opinion, who loaded him up on drugs and didn't leave the house for a while. Then the record label screwed him over. But yeah, it's a sad day for art, but it's a good rabbit hole to go down. So listen to some Beach Boys, and if you haven't already, highly recommend reading Chaos and reading Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. 2 awesome books for sure.